Hey, this is Cars, Stars, and everything in between. He's the star, Richard Bazzi from Schultz Ford. I am Bubba from 100.7 Star. And our star today is, ladies and gentlemen, from 100.7 Star. I don't know how much radio we're actually going to talk about. It is the Melanie Taylor.
Oh, wow. That's an introduction, Bubba. And I'm getting claps from Richard Bazzi. Thank you both very much. Appreciate it.
Bubba, there's a lot of questions that I'd like to ask. I almost thought about doing this without you today. Just kidding. Because I really want this to be unfiltered. And Mel, you have achieved in your life a lot of successes. And you are where you are right now. My question for people that listen to you every day, and there's very young people, there's middle people, everybody listens to you and they hear you every day. I know there are people, kids driving in the car with their parents that say, I really want to do for a living what Melanie does. What advice, Melanie, how would you train, teach, encourage children that want to do what you do? How would you get there? How do you start from your, how do you do that?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it necessarily college is not for everybody, but if you do choose to do the college route, I would definitely 1,000,000% get involved with the radio and or television station or both at that college university, or seek out that college that has a wonderful communications department and play radio. Literally go in, learn every aspect behind the scenes. It's usually professors there that are teaching that usually have their hand in the television and or radio stations on campus. So learn everything. Now, if you choose not to go the route of college, and I got to be honest, it's not for everybody, but you really love radio, you really love music, you really love talk radio, you really love sports, I would do absolutely anything in your power to send in a resume of yourself and to get on LinkedIn and to make phone calls and emails to any and all radio stations in and around Southwestern Pennsylvania and ask if you could come in to observe. Not for a paid internship, not even for an internship at that moment. I would ask if you could come in to observe some of those on-air talents, so to speak, and what they do. So you can get a better feel of what you would be interested in. There was an old-time sportscaster on Channel 11. His name was Sam Nover, Nover. And I was in college and I remember watching Channel 11, and I remember Sam Nover was always such a great sportscaster. And I sent in an email at that time and said, can I come in a couple of nights a week while you do your nightly sports, just to learn a little bit about what you do in front of that teleprompter, and some of the stuff is not on the teleprompter. And I was not really well educated in broadcasting sports, so that's why I wanted to sit in with him. I realized then that I didn't want to go the sports route, but it was really good because I sat in with him for about 4 weeks, 2 nights a week, no pay, no internship, and he let me shadow him. So I would advise, if anybody wants to do that, to reach out and do it that way.
So Melanie, that's pretty interesting. I didn't know that. But what age are we talking about that you did that?
I was 20, maybe 20, not even 21 at that time.
So what drives all that, and all of that, I'm sure, is great advice. But what drives all that? And I guess my question is, you must have the passion to do what you do, right? If you didn't have that passion, then for this industry, you wouldn't have pursued it that way. So really to have the passion. And then in today's world, there's a lot of conversation and debate about radio, television, social media. A lot of people think that terrestrial radio, which is what we do, really isn't as popular. Now, I don't agree with that personally, but you do have that other obstacle to overcome, because now you have just another source of information. And I'm wondering how you overcame that to become who you are today. Because who you are today is, you're like the Robin to Howard Stern.
Thank you.
Right?
Yeah.
Bubba, do you agree with that?
Sure.
Oh,
No, not in a bad way. I just think my thing is that everybody is their own individual. So I hate comparisons like that because,
Yeah, well, I
like,
get
for
it.
example, I like whenever I hear Howard Stern doing an interview, Robin almost never speaks, and that would never happen on Bubba's show.
No, Melanie, you can't contain Melanie. But
Right.
and that's the great part, and that's really actually a great point, Bubba. But I was not meaning to be disrespectful to the
No, I
position.
understood. I understood both
But
things. I understand both things.
because you have to be able to play both roles.
Yeah.
You have to be a Bubba and you have to be a Melanie, I think, in this format on this show. So I wonder, because I can tell you that there was no route for me to end up on the radio show with you. I had no plan. I had no route. But I had a passion, and what fueled my passion was my desire to be part of this, and to see that that's what drove you is really really impressive trait. But so from there, you went to where you started this on what station and what did you do?
So I started on a very small station and I did everything. I did a talk show on an AM station, and it was talking to teenagers about their stresses in life. I went out on Friday night football games and reported from the sidelines back to that radio station to learn sports. I did an overnight show playing music. I also did afternoon news into Paul Harvey, which was a very, very old time broadcaster. So when I started, I did absolutely everything to see what my passion, like Richard Bazzi is talking about, was. And definitely I realized 1000% that my passion was talking on the radio about music. So I wanted to go the route of the music industry. I necessarily didn't want to have my own talk show. I necessarily didn't want to go and do Friday night sports updates, even though I loved all that and I wanted to get my feet wet and learn it all. I was able to just take the route of doing radio. And on the flip side of that question, too, on the other end of it, I do a lot of speaking engagements around town for colleges and universities and high schools. And so many people ask me that, like, well, hey, I want to start my own podcast, or I want to be on the radio. How do I do it? And there is such a level of frustration because I think everybody can get up some blankets in their bedroom, go buy a microphone on Amazon, and then start their own podcast. And everybody's talking on the radio now. Everybody has their own show, whether or not that podcast goes viral and whether or not they give enough sponsorships. I mean, think about the Joe Rogans of the world. It's the first podcasters that are now millions and millions of viewers and listeners in and have a whole business of it. But it's not easy to start your own podcast. There's so many of them out there right now. You have to have something that's going to be, as Bubba always says, sticky, that's going to be something completely different. And quite frankly, it is taking away from terrestrial radio. And do I think about that every couple of days? Yeah, I do. I think about it every couple of days, of the fact that I love live and local radio. And, you know, when someone talks about how they listen to X amount of podcasts, sometimes I'm like, well, wait a minute, come back to us. We have a lot of different things that we do too that you might like, but we can't stop it. It's inevitable. The change is coming. It's there. And I think, you know, on the Odyssey app, how many different podcasts are on there. I mean, you can just scroll for a couple of minutes each morning to see the options out there of what there's out there now that you can listen to.
All right. So on with us, stand by, on with us today, the Melanie Taylor. You hear her on the radio Monday through Friday on 100.7 Star. In fact, we're going to call this Unfiltered with Melanie Taylor on Cars, Stars, and everything in between. We'll be right back after this.
Nice. Mel, what do you think?
I love it. Do I get to run a lap now? I know everybody's still on, or anybody's on, but this is just the first break, right? Into the second segment.
Yes. Yes. Yeah, I'll save that actually.
Lisa said, love me some Mr. Bazzi. I love it. I'm looking at the comments.
No way. That's Chelsea's or Kara's mom.
Hi, Kara's mom. So that I'm looking at Lisa's maiden name. So that was your maiden name, Kara?
Yes.
Yes. I love it.
Your mom still likes me.
All right, here we go. 100.1 FM, AM 1020 KDKA. This is Car Stars and everything in between. He's the star, Richard Bazzi, Schultz Ford, schultzford.com. I am Bubba from 100.7 Star, and our star today, Unfiltered with Melanie Taylor.
Melanie.
Hello.
Melanie,
Well,
I'm
the
going to
first
ask
thing-
Bubba.
Yes.
I'm going to ask Bubba because Bubba's sitting there, and I know I can see him thinking, and I know he's got a couple things he wants to add to some of this. But before I do that, before I ask Bubba his question or questions, when we left on the last break, you were talking about podcasts. I'm going to tell you this, Melanie. One of the reasons, and and the people from Odyssey have even interviewed me about this, I have a very strong belief in terrestrial radio. I believe in it. I love it. I don't think anything replaces it, not podcasts, not anything. I believe, and when they first started syndicated radio stations, and then bring in somebody, it was all corporate, save money, syndicated, put the same format in 20 markets. I hated it. I didn't like the Steve Harveys. I didn't like any of it. And the reason was when I want to hear what's really going on in my community, I want to listen to local radio, people that are part of my community, people that get me, that understand me, that know what the temperature is outside, that is current. That's what drives me to terrestrial radio. And that's why I love, and that's your success. Melanie, you've been part with Bubba of the most successful radio station in the city of Pittsburgh. You're the number one station. You've been part of it. You've created it. You and Bubba have created it. That has to give you some source of damn pride. And so what I was going to come back and say, when did you first meet Bubba? And Bubba, what question do you have from your perspective sitting in the other seat of Melanie that you might not have ever asked her before?
Well, let's start with Melanie when she met me and her first
Okay.
impression of me.
So the good thing about it is too, like I'll be starting my 29th year, but here's the thing: never left the city, totally lucky, blessed, however you want to say it. It's maybe I put up one hand and a half of a hand on how many female radio personalities are in the city of Pittsburgh that have lasted 15 years or more. There's a lot of turnover rate. There's a lot of people that have had to move out of the area, but there's a few that are really, really in this business and talented. And I want everybody to know that I did not start on a morning show. I started working overnights. Then I went to nights. Then I went to middays. The only shift I have never done is an afternoon drive shift. I've had my own show for many years prior to hooking up naturally with Bubba. So I met Bubba.
I'd like to say we never actually hooked up.
Yes.
I knew you were going to come back with that.
That's true. I met Bubba in 1998, October of 1998, when I walked into this building here, when we both were employed in different positions on WBZZ years ago, which was called, of course, B94. He was part of that morning show. I was hired as the overnight girl. And then I was the night person, the night girl. So that was the first time I met him. And, he can laugh about this. I probably never shared this with him too, but I was a little starstruck. Growing up in and around the city and having certain radio stations that I listened to my whole life, whether that be B94 or others, I was well aware of who he was. So coming in, it was like, oh, wait a minute. I can actually consider him a coworker. He's now a coworker of mine. We might not be on the air together. He has his own crew, but I'm now his coworker.
That's really cool. But what did you think of him?
I honestly didn't know him that well. I knew of who he was on the radio. So let me explain. So his persona on the radio was a certain person, and he talks about this to this day. He had a certain role on that morning show. Outside of who he was, I didn't know him well that year and the year after, only because his twin daughters were in the hospital. So when I met Bubba, he was going through some pretty personal things with some very premature babies. And I'll never forget telling my mother that this coworker of mine, his first children, he's having a really hard time. He was pulling double shift. I mean, he was at the hospital coming in on the air, and you figure, Richard, I never saw him because our shifts overlapped, but I never was in really the building with him. So in that first year and a half, it was hard to really get to know him because of
Yeah.
what he was going through.
Was there anybody that you would say was a big influence or a major influence in adopting the style that you have today?
Well, I will be honest. I interned at WDVE, and that's not a joke. I've talked about it for many years. That was where my internship was, and it was a 12 credit internship. So it was a very tough. I'm talking May till the end of August internship every single day in the summer, and that's just the way that my college IUP did it at the time. And I would tell you that many of the people over there, some that are not even there anymore, were very big influences on my radio career, especially some people behind the scenes. The promotions director over there, I would spend hours in his office. And then when I came to, 100.7 Star, and at that time B94, there was a lot of people that helped me, whether it be Bubba, whether that be Shelley Duffy, who was also on the morning show at that time. There was also a rotating level of men that were in and out during nights at the time. So I talked to a lot of them because you figure I was doing overnight. So I overlapped more with the night guys than I did the morning crew sometimes. So I was able to talk to a lot of them.
So Melanie and Bubba, I'm not trying to dominate this conversation, but it feels like I am. But the best thing in my association with this show, which is pretty major association, the best thing that I can tell you about it for me is knowing you on and off screen and the show, knowing Bubba on and off screen. You are both exactly the people that you present. Exactly. That is who you both are. And what I mean is caring, compassionate, real, down to earth. Both of you embody the city of Pittsburgh and its core values, in my opinion.
Thank you.
I think that is exactly what makes your success. I think it's exactly what makes Bubba's success. And together, it's like a recipe of a wonderful food, like wonderful cake. I mean,
Well, thank
you
you.
can't take one without the other. You can't. It wouldn't be the same.
I agree. I think 100% we're exactly who we are.
You
Exactly who
really are. You really are, and that's not always true. What
No.
would you do tomorrow, Melanie, if radio evaporated in your life? What would
I
you
would
do?
I would teach, no questions asked. I would teach in some capacity. I don't care if it was elementary level, middle school level, high school level. I would even be a college professor adjunctly teaching broadcasting if I could. I
Now,
would
knowing
do it in a
you, I
heartbeat.
know that your mother was a teacher and your father was a teacher. So
Correct.
it's
Yes.
not a real stretch for you to say that. And I love that.
It's not.
So,
And I wouldn't be honest. I would want to teach what I know. And I
but
feel like
Melanie,
I know
do
this
you
business.
realize that part of what you do today is still teaching? You're a role model for people. You still teach through this platform of radio. People look at you and they think you have this platform, Melanie. Baba, you have this platform. You both use it effectively because you both talk about the values. You talk about the city. You are teaching our children, you are teaching our adults, you are teaching this entire community who you are and that it's okay to be real and to be the people that you are. That's what you're teaching them.
Wow. Thank you. Bubba, do you have one last question for me? The one that Richard said? Anything
Nope.
you want to know?
Nope. We are officially out of time. Richard started this segment by saying, Bub, ask a question. Then I didn't get my question in, which is fine because it was interesting. This is Cars, Stars, and Everything in Between. Our guest was Melanie Taylor on 100.1 FM, AM 1020 KDKA.